Tell your neighbors why they should vote no on Prop 10. There's no reason for anybody, any true-blooded American to vote yes if they believe in property rights. And property rights are the foundation of all of our other freedoms that we have. You go through any freedom, property rights is the basis of it. And these socialists are trying to take the property rights away from us. And that's why they got this Prop 10. It's very important that every person here vote. It's going to be very close. Looks like we can, like we're a little bit ahead of them right now, but it's close. It's going to take all your votes and all your efforts trying to get other people in there too. The main argument that you can use with your neighbors, homeowners, is that this thing will allow these committees to put rent control on homes. Well, I don't care, I'm going to live in my home. Well, if anybody ever wants to rent out a room because they need the money, they want to rent out their home because they want to take a trip around the world, they're going to run into trouble. Also, when you're under rent control, you have inspections, don't you? Those of you who are under rent control, how would you like somebody to come and knock on your door at your home? Now, this is what you can say to these people. How would you like to have somebody come and knock on your door at home and tell you they need to inspect your house to see if you're living up to their standards? Get your homeowners riled up, because that's what can happen. That's what can happen. It doesn't make it happen, but that's what can happen if this Prop 10 passes. This is one of the most important things that you as an apartment owner have ever faced, other than buying your building and first getting involved in this thing. Because this takes away our rights. This takes away our property rights. And it's financed by a big socialist, head of the AIDS Foundation. And he's financing, he's put up $20-some million to try to get it passed. He got it on the ballot, and now he's trying to get it passed. And so it's there, and it's socialist, creeping socialism. Just one of the first things you do is you take away your property rights. One of the first things you do. Those of you that come from another country know what I'm talking about, because you've watched it happen in your life if you're a little older person. But anyway, learn those things that are there and use it. That homeowner thing is one of the best arguments that you can bring somebody over to vote no on this stuff. So we'll learn it real well. And we'll get started with it. If I could run the computer. Okay, going back to our American economic system of, got to turn this thing on to make it work. There we go. Our American economic system of free enterprise is the thing that we're protecting with this Prop 10. And I'll get off of that and we'll get on to how to make and keep millions. And that's one of the most important things you'll have. What I'd like you to do, and I'll repeat this later when more people come in, is for each of you to take one of these signs home with you today. We have one for each one of you. We want to sell them to you for free. Okay? I got to sell you on the idea of putting one of these in your front lawn. Okay? And take one with you when you're going out. You don't have to carry it around all day with you. So when you're going out, they'll have them at the door unless they run out of it. But be sure to take one of these home with you. Also, we have bumper stickers that I wish I could talk each one of you into doing. They're over here in this box. And there's another box. We'll get the bumper stickers out. Could you help me? There's some bumper stickers in there to get them out. Thanks. Thanks so much. Anyway, that's been the main thing we're doing today, I think, over everything else, because with no property rights, folks, you're not going to be coming to these shows at all. AOA's goal, of course, is to be forward today with this. My name is Dan Fowler. I'm president, founder of the Apartment Owners Association. We have become the largest individually organized group of apartment owners in the state. And you'll be happy to know that several people here sitting here today helped finance this thing, and as a result of being organized, and that's how we started AOA, was fighting rent control in the city of Los Angeles. And then we went from there with organized people today. Why don't we just offer everything else, trade shows, seminars, and do the whole bit, so we'll be organized when this kind of thing comes along. And so you guys donated over $250,000 that have gone to pay for those commercials that you see on television and radio, things that you hear also. But our goal today is that you go away with at least one idea that'll help you make and or keep more money than ever before. Also, that your job of providing housing for others will become more profitable, more enjoyable, more fun for you as a result of the ideas and things that you did here today. So that's our goal, and we hope that you'll adopt that goal for yourself, so that as you visit each booth and ask them, what can you do for me? You know, what can you do for me? You just shut up and listen. Let them give their sales pitch. You can walk away anytime if it doesn't sound like it's something that you want. Basically, the 7-step success system is a system that I put together. I'm sure that I'm not the originator of each one of these steps. There are a lot of much more successful people than me that have gone ahead of us thousands of years before that have practiced these same steps that you're going to hear today. So it's a 7-step success system. I've gone along and put it all together as far as how to keep and make millions of dollars in the process of putting these steps together. Yes, all of a sudden I wake up and, oh my gosh, I'm worth over $1 million. This is several years ago. And that really, all of a sudden it happens. And a lot of you, the same thing has happened. As the real estate values have gone up, and you realize, wow, I'm a full-time millionaire. Wow, what's going on? Well, there's a system to achieve it, and these are the 7 steps. And I would suggest that you write them down. If you write them down, you can get up and leave. You don't have to even go through the rest of the seminar. You've got the 7-step success system right there. And know exactly what you want. In other words, set a goal. Want it strongly enough. Do those things that you really want to do, that you have fun doing. Expect to receive it. A lot of expectations. Prepare yourself. And that's what you're doing here today, getting ideas. You're going to study and read and listen, your experience that you do, and also teaching. Pay the price. You've all paid a price to be where you are today. You paid a price to be able to provide housing for other people, and persist. Don't give up. Keep going. There's a thank you. Thanks for getting these out for me. Here's the bumper sticker. I've got 2 of them on my car, okay? And so we ask each one of you to grab the bumper sticker before you leave. We've got a bunch of them. They're also here at the table after the seminar that you can pick up. Those are the 7 steps. Write them down, follow them. I would suggest that you Google each one of those steps. Now, the first step would be goals. Just Google goals, and you can study. You can do a month study just on goals and how to set goals and what to expect from it and things along that line. Apply all the steps to every project that you go into. You want to focus on each one of these steps. You want to focus on that step. And by focusing, we have somebody in the office that does spinning. Does everybody know what spinning is today? There's a new term to me. It's when you go to the gym, and you have an instructor who sits up there and pumps a bicycle. They call that spinning. You make those wheels go around, the legs go around, and it's called spinning. And when they go into the shop, how many here have spin? You've been in one of those classes. Anybody? 1, 2, just a few of you have. Okay, a few of you are interested in your help.
Number 1, lending has been tight for now a long time, for almost 10 years. You want to get a loan, you actually have to have credit. You had to have a down payment. You had to have a history of paying your bills. I have 1 loan in my life. Got it for a very specific reason on a house in Riverside. It took me 100 days to get a yes answer from the lender. I think my FICO score is 860. Is that the highest one you can have? I had whatever the highest FICO score was. I had it. I had all these kinds of assets free and clear and cash and all that. 100 days to get a yes answer for 1 lousy 50% LTV refinance. And I thought, wow, no wonder people were saying lending is tight. It is. The next thing is we usually have a habit. We extract equity. So this is the 80s. Prices went up and we said, wow, that's great. I have equity in my home. I'm going to take some cheese out and go do something. And we put it on steroids here. This latest downturn For some reason, we stopped borrowing, well, we didn't have any equity, but now since we do, and by the way, it's true all the way to 2018, as a country of homeowners, we have not extracted one thin dime of equity in equity lines for the last decade. So all of the price gains that we've experienced are still in place. A safety net we've never had ever. We normally borrow this stuff, and this time we didn't. So here's a good question. Did we actually learn something? Probably not. We're almost willing to do whatever the lenders will allow us to do. Will the lenders allow us to do it? No. You can't probably get an equity line very easily without an 800 FICO score. And before, they used to mail it to you in the mail. I actually got them. Got them, years ago. Here, you have a pretty clear house. Here's a $500,000 equity line. Just sign here and it's done. That was it. They don't send those anymore. I haven't seen that in a while. But this is a big factor. We have a lot of equity in place. The loans that are in place this time are fixed. This is Fannie Mae's book of business. About 95% of all of their loans are fixed. But over the last number of years, it's been more like 98%. Most of the loans that are in place are fixed. They're not adjustable. They don't have time bombs of payments that are going to change. That's a safety factor. We have a lot of cash purchases, not only from investors, but owner-occupants. We have an extraordinary amount of cash purchases. Hard to lose a home you own free and clear. They can't foreclose on that one. Prices can go up or down, but it's like, don't worry about it. Investor purchases are also up. And investor is very different than speculator. That guy that I talked about at the beginning, the guy that has 63 properties on his sheet of paper, with a $3 or $4 million equity position and a minus 21 grand cash flow, was that an investor or a speculator? I was a speculator. That person was very common in 2004 and 5. That's not who owns the stuff now. People that own investments actually calculate the cash flow and keep it because it makes sense and will survive if there's a vacancy or survive if there's a downturn. Most investors are in that position. An interesting thing is when you go speaking, especially if I speak in Riverside, there seems to be construction activity that's doing fairly well. So when you say that we are experiencing a construction boom, I'm just curious. You got 6 hands and one verbal yes. Okay. Again, what I do, I love charts because what seems to be and what is can be very different. So this is the historic number of single-family homes being constructed. So for the full year 2017, we constructed about 55,000. So unfortunately, if you look at history, what's that? Like 155, 160, 175? So this is a construction boom in single families, and so is that, and so is that, and that is not. So despite all the good times that we've had, we're building at the same pace as we did in 1982 when construction loans were 20.5% interest. Isn't that astonishing? Here's why that's important. When you have a market change, and by the way, builders are the worst timing experts ever. And it's because their information is so positive, so long in the tooth, that they keep on thinking it's going to continue. How do you have a company meeting in 2006? I'm speaking in front of the Builders Association, California Builders Association, in a debate with a guy that's very smart. And I'm telling him, if I were you, I'd sell every house, every lot, every land project, buy it for pennies on the dollar 2 years from now. How hard was that for them to hear that? Because when they went back to the home office, every house they built had 5 offers on it the instant it was done. How do you have a company meeting and say, you know what, we're going to pull the plug prematurely, we're going to get the heck out of here? They were positive and positive and positive until they're not. Well, here's what happens. When this home, now think about sales in California, I'm trying to push the button for you, you can't see it anyway. If we're constructing 150,000 new homes and all of a sudden they don't sell, did the builder think, well, just rent them, that's not a problem? Or did they put them up for sale and on sale immediately? That represented about 20% or more of what was for sale in California overnight. That's a problem, especially since the people parked there paid retail, and now the builder's putting these on sale. That's scary. Right now, we don't have that problem. We're building at about a third of normal peak price. We're not building anything close to that. So if we had a problem, one of our problems would be a bunch of inventory from the new home builder, because he doesn't have a bunch of unsold stuff. He's not even speccing a lot. He's building what's already on the contract. If those people didn't fulfill the contract, you'd be out of all the new homes in a heartbeat. New homes, again, can be 20% of a market when you have a crash. We started this year with unsold new homes at less than 2% of the market. Not even close to normal. So in the next downturn, your competitor won't be a new home that won't sell. You won't have tracks of new homes up for auction. That's not going to happen, but we didn't go there. That's a big deal. We don't have any crazy loan programs to end. This is a very big factor. 10 minutes, thank you. If you watch some of the movies about the real estate crash, some of the things that they were talking about was these guys that did the bond investing and made fortunes. They were talking to people, and one of them would happen to be a stripper. I remember she was talking to the guy, and he says, well, your monthly payment doubles in 2 years. And she said, well, that's no big deal, because the guy that's the lender just said, we'll just refi it into the next program. And she felt like that would always be there. But what if it didn't? What if it wasn't there and it wasn't? That all ended and all those payments doubled, and we don't have any of that going on. A huge percentage of the marketplace is fixed at 3 or 4%. We don't have crazy loan programs. What are we going to have tomorrow? We're going to have a fixed rate loan of 5. I know. In this context, what a terrible interest rate. In 1981, I refinanced my free and clear house that I lived in to become a real estate investor full time at 17 and a half. I had a party about 2 years later when I got to refi it at 12 and a half. 5 is still historically really good. It's just higher than you've heard in the last 8 years, but it's still not all that bad. So we don't have any crazy loan programs to end, and that saves a lot of damage. We also have a template for consumers in place that we've never had. If you were behind in your payments in the 90s, there was a rule that was passed that if you were 100 days late, Fannie Freddie had to file an NOD, and they took you through the process. Did we do that in 2008 and 9? Not even close. We figured out, you know what? I'm owed $365 grand in Moreno Valley. If I put it up for market, I'm going to get 64 grand from Bruce. Why don't we not foreclose and see what happens? And that's what they did. They were allowed to do that for the first time. How many of you people know people that stayed in their house for 4 years never made payment? At the time we did some of the debating, we got invited back to the hedge fund world in New York. And one of them I talked to sort of on a regular basis. He told me what was going on with him in a little housing tract that he lived in Laguna Beach. All the people that weren't making their payments had a monthly meeting. So these were new homes bought at the peak, went down. All these people had a meeting, and they were sharing with each other what the lender was or was not doing. And they had those meetings for 4 years because the lender was like, I don't want to take it back. So now, that's how we've treated the person that's been delinquent this last cycle. In the next down cycle, we're going to say, forget that. We're going to start foreclosing immediately. Probably not going to happen. Matter of fact, one of the radio interviews we've done recently was a gentleman named Mike Novak-Smith. Mike, at the peak, probably had 800 or 900 REO listings, one of the top 5 in the country. So I called him up and I said, so what's going on in the REO world? He said, well, here's the new plan. So somebody's behind in payments. The lender calls them up and offers them a check instead of foreclosure. So they get paid 10 grand or something like that to leave, and then they don't they don't list the property on their landlord. So the lender is allowed to rent it. And that's what they do. So, said all that to say this. If the main chart that tells you how bad price damage is going to occur is the ratio of trustee sales to sales, how in the world are you going to have a gigantic pile of trustee sales come out of the loan package that we just talked about that's in place, that's been created over the last 10 years? That'd be hard to imagine. You also have companies that buy at trustee sales. They buy it at 85 cents on the dollar. Your loan to value probably in the country is 55%, according to Fannie Mae. So if you had a trustee sale, by the way, that doesn't mean this is not going to be a painful time in the next, for residential real estate, I'll be specific about that. So after another year, if we get the charts that usually fall in line, we'll have an affordability low, whatever that is this cycle, and then we'll have sales stop. Sales are already stopping. That's one of the reasons I'm concerned, is that industry-wide, in the flipper business, and I get calls all the time. I got an email this morning at 5:30. Got all these houses for sale, we've done everything we normally do, and nothing is selling. Well, that's the problem when you have hard money loans, right? That gets costly. So something is going on. So California is changing in the residential side. Whenever we hit that affordability number that's low, sales stall and sometimes go down quite severely. That causes other dominoes, and builders stop building, migration exits, all those things start being negative. So I just don't like getting caught by surprise on that. But the one thing that I don't see us having is a big ratio of trustee sales this time to sales. I don't know how that would materialize out of this pack of loans. Does that make sense? Okay. So this is going to be a more benign downturn. But there are charts, if I showed you charts that say you could have an 8-year period of nothing occurring. So that's part of what we're going to talk about in January to a group of people that have a fair amount of their net worth in rental real estate in California that makes no sense to keep here. So they have a 600 grand house that produces $300 a monthly cash flow, and they have a $400,000 equity position. Does that make any sense? Not if prices aren't going to help you out in the future. So there'd be a better decision. So at any rate, I think California is about to transition in single families to one of those tougher times, and we'll start talking about that next year with a document called the California Real Estate Market on Borrowed Time. I'll open for some questions, and then we'll talk about what we have to offer and wrap it up. Okay, the question was, is the bubble already starting to burst, and then why is it wise to bail? Well, that's an all in or nothing. It depends. It just depends. If you're talking about your residence, okay, well, why would you sell your residence? You're going to want to live somewhere. And it probably doesn't matter if it goes up or down. So that's what I mean. It's not an easy answer. Half of you guys probably own these apartment buildings free and clear. You're going to get a big check no matter what happens. Your life is already boring. Leave it alone. I'm not saying you should sell this stuff. That might be completely mess you up. I'm just saying don't get surprised when your cap rate goes up and your value goes down. Why should that surprise anybody in this audience that's got experience? Are your cap rates supposed to start with a 3 or a 4? That's crazy. What if your 10-year T-bill gets to 5%? Would you rather have a boring 5% 10-year T-bill than an exciting apartment building at 3.5%? Come on. That makes no sense. Well, that's your competitor. So just make reasonable decisions, but you don't have to go, oh my God, it's going to fall off the cliff. But don't get caught surprised. I would hate to be back here next year and you go, oh man, I should have done something. You can make that decision because you still have buyers that think this is a good market to buy apartment buildings in, but they can't find anything to buy. Because you guys are so excited with your equity positions, like, I'm just going to hold this baby. Okay? If I were you, I would really think about, if I didn't have that perfect situation where I really don't care if it goes up or down, I'm getting my checks and I'm done, leave that alone. But if it's other than that, you got in for the price to go up, then guess what? You know, this is one asset class where I'd say, Hey, I'm going to cash in some chips and go have some fun. Yes, sir. Affordability is at 28, but probably it's more like 25 because the interest rates have gone up, and you don't calibrate that until every quarter. You're probably at 25, which is a long way from 17 historically. Okay, so what's the deal? Well, just to give you an extreme example, what if they came out tomorrow and said, okay, you have to have an 800 FICO score to get a loan? Affordability would then, it would be, a new number would be the 17, and the equivalent reaction in the market. So what's happening is you really have restrictive lending saying, guess what, we're probably not going to get the 17%, we're not going to let it happen. Those people can't get a yes answer. That's what's going on. When lenders write loans, by the way, if they have a default, I just talked to my friend named Kerry, who's a lender for Providence. He said if you have a loan that's a first payment default, you instantly buy that loan back. And you sell it on the market that they create, you lose 15% of principal, like that. That's exactly what happens. That's why lenders, don't you read the same articles I do? Every week there's a lender settles a dispute, writes a $50 billion check for something they did in 2006. That's still going on regularly. Well, guess what? When you write a $50 billion check for something you did 12 years ago, it's really unlikely you go back to the office and say, okay, well now that that's over, let's cut loose. That is not happening. So this cycle is different than anything we've experienced. Normally, at this affordability, prices are going up double digits, sales go through the roof. We're not having any of that. So this time is different. That's what's difficult about projecting this. But in a way, it's safer. If you have an ending and affordability number that's way above 20, then you have a pretty benign ending that's very likely. Yes. Right. Yeah. Well, it depends. Okay, the question was, you buy your building in 2012, it's gone up like crazy, your cash flow is great. Zero. You know what? It's a personal decision because zero is still zero, huh? And it depends why you showed up there. It really does. If you showed up there to say, I'm locking in an asset for the rest of my life, it's going to pay me for my retirement, and I'm going to pay it off, and I've got loans that I can do that with, that's a safer bet than saying, okay, well, something changes. If the cap rate goes to 6, I'm screwed. Or if rents go down, I'm screwed. Or if vacancies go up, I'm in trouble. I wouldn't hang on to anything that's marginal. And by the way, what changes, buyers look at product differently in tough times. So I call it flawed properties. I like to stay with stuff that everybody will want. If you have that rental, great. If you don't, then I'd be cautious. I have been given the exit sign. I tell you what, I'm going to answer questions, and I'm notoriously terrible about talking about what we do. We have a website that has all of our education. What's unique about the website is that, before when you bought seminar materials, you'd walk away with it in a binder, and it could never be updated, it could never change. Our website is filled with all of that information, only we can update it. Part of what we did this year was we did a seminar. Just one part of it was EDUs. My son Aaron did extensive research, talked to the center that created the legislation, talked to many of the cities and how they're handling it. That's just one of the chapters that's available at the website. It's the most updated information about having EDUs in your back of your property and how the different cities are handling it out. All that costs $1 a day. You can get it for $365. And because we usually try to create a special, we're having a 4-hour event Saturday in Orange County that you guys are invited to for free. That's part of the 365. And on that day, we'll have myself talking. We'll have the people that we trust in the accounting world, in the 1031 exchange world, in the retirement dollars world, and all of that for $365. So if you're interested, come see Aaron up here. And if you have more questions, can I answer them up here for a little while? Pardon me? What part of zero didn't I get? I'm bad at hearing. Okay, guys. Hey, thank you. I enjoyed it.
Apartment report. You are not entitled to do. You're not entitled to ask for rent. Boston loves this. Or, and it says if you haven't fixed it for, I believe it's 45 days. So if you get it fixed right away, you're okay. If the tenant fails to provide you access, that is a defense. But you need to be leery of this and know if there is an outstanding health department report, if you have a health department report, get everything fixed, get signed off before you serve a 3-day notice. Because that is a way to get, they can get all their attorney's fees. Regardless, that's by statute. It's called not by the agreement, but by statute. So that's the only other way they can get attorney's fees. And let me tell you, they'll figure it out in a minute. So change your attorney's fee notice. I've had the Los Angeles Housing Department say it's not valid, but it is. They try to argue everything. Recently, a lot of my evictions, any case...
...was it set out 3 basic protections. The first protection said cities cannot put rent control on any property built after 1995. Doesn't matter what it is, you cannot put rent control on it. The second protection it came up with was, it said single-family homes, townhomes, and condos were exempt from rent control, which is the way it exists today. And then the third and most important protection it gave you was it said, when your unit goes vacant under rent control, it is now decontrolled. It is no longer controlled. You can set the rent wherever you want until the next tenant moves in, and then it goes back under control. And so, for those of you who have rent control properties, I imagine you guys would agree with me. The only thing that keeps mom and pop rent control building owners alive is that aspect of it, is that when you get a vacant unit, you can go to market. Because there is always turnover. People get married, they take jobs elsewhere, and so that's what gives mom and pops the ability to live on a rent control building, and quite candidly, also to maintain that property, is getting people out of those units and taking it to market. So those were the 3 protections created under Costa-Hawkins. And let me explain now the effects of a repeal. We're voting on this in about 2 weeks. If Prop 10 wins, people vote yes, it will be repealed immediately. Starting November 7th, there will be no more Costa-Hawkins, which means all those 3 protections go away. Now, does that mean that they go away overnight? No. Let me be clear about this. All it means is that Costa-Hawkins doesn't exist anymore. So cities that have rent control will have to change their rent control ordinance to whatever suits them. They will include single-family homes, townhomes, condos. I'd be willing to bet, and I'm not a betting man, but I'd be willing to bet Los Angeles changes its ordinance right away to say there is no vacancy decontrol. In fact, most of you know the county commissioners have already, on September 11th, when they put that rent freeze in place, the very next day, what they did was they directed their staff to start drafting the rent control ordinance for unincorporated LA. Like I said, I'd be willing to bet there's no vacancy decontrol in that. So on November 7th, if Costa-Hawkins is repealed, all of those protections go away. And like Dan said to you, and it's not a joke at all, the government will have the right to say to you in your own single-family home, hey, you could rent this tomorrow, so we want to come in and do inspections to make sure that these properties are habitable. How many of you have properties in Long Beach? A few of you. Those of you who have properties in Long Beach just went through this, literally. Long Beach tried to slip its own rent control in literally on Christmas Eve about 3 years ago, and the associations all saw it, and we fought it tooth and nail. And there was one lady, Joni, if you're here, raise your hand. Joni Weir. She's not here. I want to just stand up and give credit to Joni Weir. She's a mom and pop owner. She's not a wealthy person, but she almost single-handedly took rent control down in Long Beach. And they started off by saying, we don't want rent control, all we want is an inspection of your apartments. We just want to inspect your apartments. It was actually being done through the fire department. Then as we looked more and more, and you looked at the language they were using, it came right out of Los Angeles rent control. So again, you lose these protections, you're going to lose all your property, eventually you will lose all of your properties in Los Angeles to rent control. They're already drafting the ordinance. All right, now, let's talk real quickly about what's so bad about rent control. Besides the fact, well, actually, before I get there, I'm going to back up for a second. I want to talk about some emerging trends. How many of you have heard of tenant unions? Only a handful of you. I would bet you're some of the people who live in Long Beach. If you don't know what a tenant union is, when you go home tonight, or if you have a smartphone, you can do it right now. I would like you to hop on Facebook and just Google, that's fine. Hop on Facebook and do a search for tenant unions Los Angeles. You will be blown away at how many tenant unions there are out there. Hop on YouTube and do a search for tenant unions, and wait till you see what the tenant unions are doing, how they're picketing the management companies, how they're picking single family owners. The tenants unions are growing, and that's an emerging trend that's only happened over the last couple of years. So I think it's important that you understand that, and please do what I asked you. Check them out on the internet. When you look at 2017 and 2018, I'm going to go list all the cities that attempted to implement rent control. You've got Pasadena, Long Beach, Santa Ana, Inglewood, Glendale, Mountain View, Richmond, San Mateo, Burlingame, and Alameda. 10 cities attempted to pass rent control. The good news is it went down in every city. It did not pass. The bad news is the people who were promoting it knew it would, and they specifically said, we know it's going down. We're coming back next year, and they are. They're not giving up this fight. And Los Angeles, like I said, LA County Commissioners have already said, start drafting the new rent control ordinance for all properties in LA. So there's these growing movements going on. And that's the bad news, is just because we won last year and this year. By the way, how many of you think we're going to win this election? Win the Costa Hawkins battle? Okay, about 50% of you. I'm with you. We're going to win this. And it's not just a rah-rah cheerleader. They're doing polls every day. We are ahead in the polls by a significant amount. So you can feel comfortable about that, but it's not over. And like Dan said, you got to donate. Please donate. I'm going to share a story with you real quick and cut into a little bit of my time, but it exemplifies a big problem. I was on the phone the other day to somebody I've known for over 40 years. I knew her parents. She's a property owner, an apartment owner. She's non-rent control right now. We were talking about rent control and all the things she's trying to accomplish, and she was very concerned about it. And she said, so what do I do? And I told her everything I tell you guys all the time. Go to your city council meetings, join the fight, get involved in legislative matters, know who your representatives are up in Sacramento. And then I finished it off with this. You know what? I won't use her name, I'll make it up. You know what, Jane? Write a check for $500. Oh, God, money's kind of tight right now. Now here's a woman who she's a multimillionaire based on her property. She owns a 26-unit building in Los Angeles County that is not rent controlled, right? When I asked her to donate $500, oh, money's tight. And I'm not saying it's not, but I am saying that you should look at it this way. Instead of worrying about writing a check for $500, worry about the value of your property if rent control goes in. How much will the value of your property diminish if we get rent control? By the way, what is the value of your property based on? Your income stream, right? How much rent you can generate. If they can cap the amount of rent you can get out of your property, it crushes the value of your property. Rents right now, how many of you have rents that are $500? Not very many of you, right? They're all up in the $1,500 and above. She was worried about writing a check for $500. And what I said to her was, look, it isn't over. We're going to win this year, but they're coming back in 2 years. So what I would encourage every one of you to do is this year, put $1,000 aside. Next year, put $1,000 aside. And when it comes up again, you've got $2,000 or $3,000, write a check and write it to AOA, because they've aligned with something called I just drew a blank on it. It's the Business Roundtable. And the Business Roundtable has been more responsible for fighting rent control on Costa Hawkins than any other organization out there. They've hired 2 lobbyist groups that have won 10 out of the 11 last election cycles on every issue they put up. So they're doing great things, but it takes a little bit of money. I'm not normally somebody who pitches for money, but it's so important that I'm going to pitch it. Remember, $1,000 a year right now. Don't win this and walk away and say, yeah, we won, it's over, life's back to normal. It's not. Things have changed forever in California's landscape. Understand that. The legal landscape has changed in the last 10 years like you can't believe, as far as real property rights are concerned. So enough about that. Let's jump right into this. All right. So, by the way, there's a worldwide movement of tenant unions. This is not just the United States, it's not just California. So let's talk about rent control real quick, before I get to the other side. So what is so bad about rent control? If you attended Dennis's seminar, I was listening to it as well, he pretty much hit the nail on the head. For those of you who have rent control right now, you know what I'm talking about. For those of you who don't, let me tell you this, it isn't just that the rents are going to be capped. They will be capped, and if you really believe the CPI is 3% and if inflation is 3%, you're incredibly naive. Inflation hovers around 9% by any reputable source right now. So every single year, if you're capped at 3%, you're going in the whole 6%. right? How many of you had your trash fees go up, right? Triple, quadruple fees. Do you know that you are not permitted to pass those through to the tenant? So your fees are going up every year, but they're capping your rent. That's not, in my opinion as a litigator, that's not even the worst part about rent control. The worst part about rent control is when you have a problematic tenant. Do you know how hard it is to get rid of them in rent control? It is next to impossible. Like Dennis said earlier, I'm gonna reiterate exactly what he said. You can have a tenant that is basically running around naked, drunk, hurting people on your property. All of the tenants will call you up saying, get rid of this guy. But when you ask them to come to court, initially they'll say yes. But when it comes time to come to court, you know what they say? Oh, I can't come to court, I can't be a witness. And in order to evict somebody under rent control, the bar is so high, you need witnesses. You need people there to testify about the problems you're going through. Other than non-payment of rent, any other violation of the lease has to be determined by a judge whether it's called a substantial breach or not. The only way you're going to convince judges of that in today's environment is bringing witnesses to say, yeah, I live there, and that guy's a nutcase. He runs around naked and drunk and bangs on my windows, and even then, it's hard to get the judges to evict them. And that's all under the rent control issue. When you are non-rent control, evicting tenants, not super simple, not life like it was 10 years ago, but incredibly simple compared to rent control. So that's the real problem with rent control. Like I said before, they use an index that's fake. You know what's taken out of the CPI index when they calculate how much you can raise your rent? Food, housing, and fuel. What are the three most expensive expenses we all have? Food, housing, and fuel. They take that right out of their calculation. So 3% is a false number that they're giving you. It's an artificially low number. I'm sorry, CPI stands for the Consumer Price Index. It is the index that is used to establish how much you can raise your rent. I apologize. So, like I said, the downfall of rent control is capping your rents at an artificially low rate, and then on top of that, getting rid of problem tenants. Of those of you who have rent control, how many of you, raise your hand if you've gone through an eviction in the last year? Exactly, a lot of you. And of those of you who have gone through an eviction, you don't have to raise your hand on that, but if you have a rent control building and you've gone through an eviction, how emboldened have the tenants become in the last 10 years? They think they're untouchable. And you know why? Because they can demand jury trials, they can, it's a numbers game, it's going to cost you a minimum of $15,000 to get them out if you actually have to go to a jury. That's a minimum. We just had a trial with less than a year ago. We won the trial, unanimous verdict. You know what it cost my client? Rent control property, downtown LA. We were evicting known gang members because the court actually ordered my client to evict them. You know what the cost of the trial was? $55,000. We won. He literally just made his last payment to me about 2 days ago. So that's how crazy rent control gets for you. So that's the downside to rent control. Now, so that's Costa-Hawkins. That's what you guys have to look forward to if Costa-Hawkins gets repealed in about 2 weeks. Let's talk about the Ellis Act. Many of you raised your hand when I said how many of you do not know what the Ellis Act is. So when I say to you, your legislators are 10 to 20 years ahead of you, they have a good memory. Most landlords, including myself, do not have a good memory. Once pain's over, we move on. What was happening a long time ago, and it still happens today, is the people who run the rent control boards, by the way, none of them are landlords, and they make a ton of money to sit, and they're not elected people, all right? They're just hired like a position. They know that but landlords are savvy, and when they get their market rents capped, you know what they do? They turn around and they turn their units into condos. Housing will tell you, since rent control went into effect, we have a shortfall of 50,000 units right now. And you know what? They're absolutely correct, we do. Do you know why? Landlords turned them into condos and sold them because rents don't make sense anymore. They sold them off to developers who bulldoze the building and turn them into brand new buildings with no rent control on them. So what happens is the investors start taking the properties off the market. Any investor would. I would. If I could make more money as a condo or selling it to a developer and not having to deal with toilets and tenants anymore, absolutely I would do it. So what they're doing now is they're attacking the Ellis Act. They're trying to get the Ellis Act repealed. What is the Ellis Act? The Ellis Act is a law that actually allows you to go out of business. It actually states that you can literally pull all of your units off the market anytime you want. You have to give notice to your tenants, and there's a lot of requirements and hoops you have to jump through. But when you get fed up, you can say, I'm done with this, and jump out of the market. there's an incredible attack going on against the Ellis Act right now. So think about it now. We're starting to put the picture together. We've got rent control coming if we lose. They know what you're going to do. If rent control comes in, you're going to start selling and bulldozing your buildings. And so they're trying to force you to stay in business. You cannot remove the properties from the market anymore. Is that crazy? Absolutely, it's crazy. And this is what I meant by your property rights, your private property rights, which are the foundation of this country and every single right we have. It all stems out of property rights. If you really want to know where it comes from, you can read John Locke's books. But all of that is being taken away from you by these politicians, and believe me when I tell you, it's not just one side or the other. It isn't the Democrats, it isn't the Republicans. They're all up in Sacramento working together to hammer you guys on this stuff. I'm going to name a couple of these people who are local in a minute. So I'm not going to take questions right now because then everybody starts asking questions and I'm already on a tight time frame. What is the third hook in this web, or the third piece of the web, or the third leg of the stool? The Prop 13. So we're going to cap your rents. By the way, we're also going to take away your vacancy decontrol. Then we're going to take away your ability to go out of business. And then when it's all over, like Dan told you, it's been on the ballot now, it's coming up. Then we're going to strip away your protections on your taxes, and we're going to jack your taxes through the roof. And I don't know if he said it today, but Dan's aware of it, I'm aware of it. If you read Dan's magazine from last month, I think the flyer, no, it was this one. When the flyer came out, it was quoted right in the flyer. There's a tenants' rights advocate that said, one day you guys will beg us to take your buildings. And they're not kidding. That is what's happening. They're trying to make this as painful as they possibly can for you, and as economically impracticable for you to own these buildings, so you will walk away from them. And does that sound crazy to you guys? It is socialist. That's exactly right. I didn't want to go down that path, but I'm going to since you brought it up. Thank you. Let me explain what this is coming from. You may or may not know this, but I was a history major, so I've studied the history through significant periods of time. I'm going to explain to you the difference between communism, socialism, and progressivism. There's not a lot of difference. Communism, and those of you who know the communist revolution, who were the first people they came out after? The property owners. They came and they took all of your property away, and you know what they did to implement communism? They literally killed tens of millions of people. And when they got into power, somebody looked up and said, hey, you know what? We can do this without killing people. We'll call ourselves socialists, and we will legislate them into communism without having to kill them, because we already have their property, so they're not going to put up that much of a fight anymore. So that's how we got to socialism. And then the word socialism, even in the United States, got a bad reputation. Not anymore. Everybody raises their hand, hey, yeah, I'm a proud socialist. But now they're called progressives. And it's a social warrior movement that's going on. And like I told you, this is not just in California or the United States. It's a worldwide movement. So be aware of what this is. It is nothing other than purebred communism coming to the United States, unless all of us are fully aware of it and stand up and literally fight it. You do not have to raise your hands. I'm going to have to ask you a question because I do not want to embarrass you. How many of you go to the city council meetings for the cities in which your buildings are located? Don't have to raise your hands, but I'll bet you, I know the statistics because I ask the same question every time. Most of you in this audience don't go to your city council meetings. That's where it's starting. You have no idea what's going on in your city council meetings. How many of you know your representatives' names in Sacramento that represent the districts in which your properties are located? Don't raise your hands because I know some of you know. The vast majority of you do not know your representatives' names. That is the problem. They are ramrodding this stuff down your throats because you guys are not active in legislative affairs. And you know why you're not active? Because you're too darn busy in life trying to make a living, trying to make these buildings work, and that is by design. So, please, like I said to the lady I was talking to on the phone, the most important thing, we're kind of jumping to the what can I do about it. Well, I'm sorry, I already talked about who's driving this. Legislators, tenants' rights organizations, including the labor unions. The labor unions said they are funding these tenants' rights organizations, by the way. Well, let me ask you a question. Do the two make sense? Labor unions, tenants' rights unions? Let me just say unions. Where do unions come from? They come from a communist background and a socialist background. So the labor unions are funding these organizations right now. Understand that. In this election, they backed out. That's why we're going to win. The Business Roundtables raised $45 million, and the tenants' rights organizations were only able to raise $14 million to fight this. I can't answer questions. I'm so sorry, but thank you for your comments. Why did the labor unions not fund them this time? Because they saw the polls, and in my opinion, the reason the polls are bad is because in this go-around, they included single-family homes in it. And that affects so many people that it got such a bad rap that the polls were down. The labor unions said, we're not going to invest a bunch of money in this round. We know we suspect we're going to lose. If we win, great. But we suspect we're going to lose. We're going to come back next time, take out single-family homes, and we're going to come at it again. So understand who you're fighting right now. It is the legislators. So find out who your representatives are. Write them letters. Talk to them. Not just today. Not before we win. After we win, write them letters saying, "Hey, I want to know your position on this. We know it's coming back. Let me explain to you the negative consequences of that." And I'm going to tell you one more thing I'd like you to do. If you haven't already done this, I know many of you have. If you want my newsletter, right now we're sending it out twice a week. And every time I send it out, it's got no less than 10, usually about 20 articles on rent control and coastal Hawkins from both sides of the argument. So you can educate yourselves. Why am I doing this? I want you to write letters to your executives with intelligent arguments about why this is bad. Why? Because when you read some of these articles, you're going to realize that every single city in which they've tried rent control fails. The rent control fails, and the cities, most of them do nothing about it. The city of Boston, to their credit, they tried it, they saw what was going on, they got rid of it. Yale University, is Yale a conservative or a liberal university? Absolutely liberal. Don't kid yourselves. Yale University, Harvard University, liberal or conservative? Liberal university. The Rand Corporation, which is a conservative corporation, is a think tank. All three of these have published public studies that say rent control destroys cities, it takes housing out of the market, it increases the rent, and it contributes to gentrification, which is basically a fancy way of saying we're kicking all the poor people out, only rich people will be able to live, or upper middle class will be able to live in these cities. I can personally attest to you that I know multiple doctors and lawyers who live in rent-controlled units. The interior of their unit is absolutely beautiful. They will not move. They are preventing the people that rent control is designed to help, they're preventing them from having housing, affordable housing, all right? So that's the fight we're up against, and I want you guys to write become educated about this stuff. Read the articles. Like I said, if you want to get on the mailing list, twice a week right now I'm sending it out with nothing but these articles. Educate yourself, write these letters. Please do yourselves a favor. All right, and the powers that be. I'm not going to go too much into this because you'll all think I'm a conspiracy theorist. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I know that conspiracies are true. What am I talking about? There is an agenda, and it is a worldwide agenda. All right, it is called Agenda 21. It was actually signed by the first President Bush. It was attended by every single nation on the planet in Rio de Janeiro back in 1992. When you guys start attending your city council meetings, how many of you have heard the word sustainable? Sustainable development, green development. How many of you have heard the word green? Green, right? Everybody's pushing towards green and sustainable. That is the Agenda 21. It's a growing number. This is the largest number I've ever seen in 11 years of doing these seminars when I ask this question every single seminar. If you don't know what Agenda 21 is, please go home and look it up. It is a crazy worldwide agenda to transform humanity. I didn't make that phrase up. It comes right out of the language of the agenda, it's not a treaty, it's actually I forget what they call it now. It's not a treaty, but it was signed by every single nation on the planet. They are trying to radically transform humanity, and they're doing it by taking away property rights. Which country is the wealthiest nation in the world? The United States. Why? What do we have? Property rights, right? There was a book called The Mystery of Capitalism, came out in the year 2000. It asked, how come the United States survived so well under capitalism where every other country that has capitalism does not do nearly as well as the United States? It's all about property rights. It's all because we have title to our property. If I want to start a business, I can go tap into my own home, right? I can go to the bank and say, I want an equity loan. Property rights in the United States have created so much phenomenal wealth that we are the one country standing in the way of this agenda being implemented worldwide. I know it sounds crazy, and I cannot convey to you in 20 minutes 20 years of research that I've been doing on my own. By the way, you want to know who taught me about it and who pointed me in that direction? My stockbroker. You know what he does for a living right now? I kid you not. He got out of the stockbroker market. He's a stockbroker for nothing but pot stocks, marijuana. The guy does phenomenally well. Incredibly brilliant guy. 20 years ago, this guy pointed me at Agenda 21, and I've been reading about it ever since then. And like I said, today when I asked the question, this is the most people who have ever raised their hand that they know about this. If you have a smartphone, do yourself a favor right now, in this seminar, I want you to Google this, Agenda 21 map. When you Google that, they're going to show you a bunch of pictures of maps. All of you who do that are going to see the 2/3 of the United States is covered in red. The red represents, it's called a biodiversity map, represents what the proponents of Agenda 21 call non-human zones. Humans will not be allowed to go in those zones. Wait till you see the amount of land that the government is trying to confiscate from you guys. Our private property rights are being attacked. They are trying to take our private property rights, not just in California. It is across the United States. Like I said, I just got back from a cattle ranchers summit in Oklahoma. Last week I went there, took my wife and my child, and sat there for 3 days listening to the ranchers talk about the exact same issues. They're being legislated out of their land, and when the government legislates them out of their land, you know what they do with it? They put it in a trust so that it can never be developed again. Never. That's what's going to happen. And I'm not trying to scare you guys. I'm telling you, they're 20 years, 1992 that was signed. 02, 12, 18. They're 25 years ahead of you. I'm standing here telling you guys about this now and asking you, get involved legislatively. We have proven that we can shut this stuff down. The people in City Hall have no idea what's going on. When you bring it to their attention, I just named 10 cities that they attempted rent control, and 10 cities we won this past year. When you bring it to their attention and when you guys get active, we win. When November 7th rolls around, and like I said, I think we're going to win, and you wake up that next morning and you go, woo, we dodged a bullet. Okay, I'm off to work. Don't forget about this stuff. Please get actively involved. If you're not actively involved in legislative matters and you want to be, you want to know more about this stuff, call my office, ask to talk to me. Realistically, honestly, it's going to be hard to get in touch with me. Just leave me a voicemail. Here's my email, spell it and say it. I'd like to get involved legislatively, and I will put you in touch with the right people to do it. Again, this doesn't just hurt you guys today, it hurts your kids. All right, motives behind the anti-property movement is wealth redistribution. How many of you feel that the landlord-tenant laws in the last 10 years have been a wealth redistribution? Absolutely. In San Francisco, they had a bill that was on the ballot about 3 years ago. The bill, I'm not joking about this, you can Google it and look it up. The bill said that if a tenant lived in your apartment building for 10 years, they gained an equity interest in your property. They were part owner of your property because they lived there for 10 years. They didn't struggle and save the down payment on it. They don't pay the insurance. They don't pay the mortgage. They're not exposed to the legal liability if somebody gets trips and falls on their property and you get sued. But they are an equity owner because they've lived there for 10 years. That's how crazy this stuff is that's going on. It lost, but it's coming back, believe me. It is wealth redistribution and it is socialized housing. So when you look up social justice warriors and housing, you will start seeing this is a worldwide trend. It can be fought and it can be won, but it is a growing movement. All right, forced integrated housing. That stuff I'm talking about is fair housing. They are trying to force low and ultra low housing into middle and upper middle class neighborhoods and integrate people. Now, look, I have no problem with people who are low or ultra low income. I've got absolutely no judgment toward them at all. But from a practical standpoint, if you are, let's say you're not a doctor, you're not a lawyer, you're not an accountant, you're just average Joe Blow. If you're middle class, when you put low and ultra low housing or tenants in your buildings with middle class people, How well do they mix? They do not mix well. There is a different paradigm. It is not anything other than a different cultural background. They create problems, right? I'm not saying the low class, the lower socioeconomic people create the problems. The problems oftentimes come from the middle class people who just don't want to live near them, or everything the low income person does is somehow wrong. They mix like oil and water. That's the problem. And when you get into this stuff and you're under rent control and you cannot get rid of these people, you're the one who are going to be facing these problems. But that is the motives behind all this legislation. Wait till you see what comes out in fair housing next year. And it's one of the things I'm heavily involved in, is what fair housing is doing. The criminal background checks, I wrote an article on it. If you haven't seen it and you want to know what's going on with it, email me, I'll send it to you. But they're doubling down on criminal background checks. They're doubling down on the comfort animals. They're doubling down on the reasonable modifications and accommodations. Basically, they're making it very difficult for you guys to get rid of tenants. Here's the new trend. Even in non-rent control, you serve a 60-day notice. I always get letters now from housing rights authorities saying, oh, my client is disabled, and so we're asking you to rescind the 60-day notice. Take it back. Let her live there, because she's physically disabled and she can't pack. She can't move. And if you just deny that, you just reject it and say, no, I'm denying your reasonable accommodation request, you can bet you're going to be getting a letter from Fair Housing. I know, because I defend my clients on this stuff all the time. What they're about to roll out is crazy. It's not going to be implemented as law right away, but what they're doing is they're exposing everybody to it piece by piece, so you get slowly acclimated to it. So what are the implementation of the motives? Like I said, rent control, anti-private property laws, Agenda 21, and through Agenda 21 is sustainable development. So I don't want to sound like Johnny Raincloud. I'm not trying to be. I still own property. But I will say this, and I can't harp on this fact enough. What can you do about it? Please, be proactive. Become knowledgeable about Costa-Hawkins, Ellis Act, Prop 13, and Agenda 21. Start attending your city council meetings. Every time you hear the word sustainable, I want you to approach your city council members and say, could you please define sustainable for me? And I want you to ask them, you probably want to write this down, I want you to ask them for two things. Ask them for their 10-year master zoning plan. Do you want to know what your zoning is going to be in 10 years? Because they're actually actively down zoning properties. And then you also want to ask for what they call their housing element, all right? Most cities, 99% of cities have a housing element. They will tell you where you can find it. They might hem and haw, they might try not to tell you, but they have them. Keep pushing. When you read their housing element, it will tell you exactly what they intend to do for the housing on both their, apartments, rentals, non-rentals, private property ownership. It'll walk you through what they intend to do, and then when you start lining it up with everything I've talked about today, you're gonna see the picture and say, holy cow, this is not good unless we get active. So get involved on a local and state level at a minimum. Align with other landlords. Like, there's a booth here. I'm going to send you over to it today. Please go visit this booth. It's called Better Housing for Long Beach, and it's I think it's 406. It's all the way to that side of the building, all the way at the end of the row. That's Joni Weir's booth. Joni Weir, like I said before, almost single-handedly kept rent control out of Long Beach this last election. She's not a lobbyist. She's not wealthy. She's a mom and pop owner. That's it. She owns a few units in Long Beach. She knows how to mobilize people. Get involved with her. Get involved with she's not an apartment association, but you should talk to her about her organization and what she did that worked. Align with tenants on common ground. What do I mean by that? Not today. I'm not necessarily a fan of going out and educating tenants about all the downsides to repealing Costa-Hawkins today, because most of them don't even know about it, and I don't want them to go figure it out and then vote. But after the election, after we win, talk to your tenants if you have that kind of a relationship and just say, hey, by the way, what'd you think about that Prop 10 at Costa-Hawkins? Strike up a dialogue, but only after you've read these articles that I'm talking about that are written in plain English, but go through all of the studies and the negative consequences and how it affects the kids and the grandkids. They're all in the articles. Create a little bullet point list and talk to your tenants about it and say, wow, I know it sounds good today, but let me talk to you about rent control and all the negative effects. By the way, let me give you a couple streets in downtown LA where you can drive down that street and look at all the rent control buildings. Just look at the condition they're in, and then ask yourself, is that a building you want to live in? Because if you want rent control, that's eventually what you're going to get. Strike up that conversation with your tenants and get them on your side so that in 2 years when we're fighting this again, they're on your side and they're smart enough to say, hey, this is not a good thing for us. So that's what you can do. That's how you can really get involved. Conclusion, California legislators are an absolute minimum of 10 years ahead of you. You don't know it because you don't even know what they're doing up, you don't even know who your representatives are, let alone what they're doing up in Sacramento. They desire and are working towards socialized housing. They are implementing laws designed to reduce your profit and increase your bureaucratic headaches. For those of you in rent control, you know exactly what I'm talking about. For those of you not in rent control yet, if you think you've dealt with bureaucracies before, wait till you deal with rent control. Why do cities implement rent control? One, it creates jobs. Two, it creates fees. Who's paying for all those fees? You guys are. You're going to pay a registration fee for every single unit you have. Those registration fees drive jobs. Where are the jobs? The inspectors, the staff members. If you think this is a small business, you're crazy. Millions and millions and millions go through the Los Angeles Housing Department every single year. In fact, a few years ago, I never saw the paperwork, but it came from credible sources. FBI investigated Los Angeles Housing Department because apparently they had millions of dollars sitting in a fund that it came from you guys, but they weren't doing anything with it. It is a bureaucratic nightmare to work through it. They promise you just and reasonable returns on your properties. Baloney. 3% is not a just and reasonable return on your property. They tell you that, well, there's a program. You can get your capital expenses reimbursed. That's true, you can. But you have to fill out all the paperwork and pay the fees to submit it. And then you get to come before the board, and the board gets to vote on whether or not they think your capital improvement represents an improvement that the tenants should actually contribute to. So the whole thing is structured to make you pull your hair out and say, it's not worth it. You know, less than 10% of the landlords in rent control property, in rent control jurisdictions, actually utilize those programs because they're a pain in the rear. I go to them with my clients, and I tell my clients ahead of time, you know, this is going to be a tough road to hoe. This is hard. The odds are you're not going to get what you want. You might get something, but you won't get what you want. And they walk out of there incredibly frustrated. So it's an incredible bureaucratic machine that does nothing but buy votes for the next election. Literally, they're buying tenants' votes. They're pandering to the tenants by keeping their rents artificially low. Buys votes for the next election, creates jobs for the people who work in the industry who are working against your rights. That's what it does. All right, it can be beaten. It takes a united front by you guys, and it may require you educating your tenants on it. All right, there's the email I was talking about. I could sit here and talk all day long about the issues involved in this, and they go off into different directions. I'm limited to like 30, 40 minutes at the most. If you want the newsletter, sign up for the email. If you want to get involved legislatively, sign up for the email and tell me that. Whatever you got, if you want the slideshow, sign up for the email. I'm happy to send you the slideshow. Be patient with me. I'm incredibly active. Like I said, I just got back from Oklahoma. Going to a meeting after we leave here tonight. I'm going to be out of the state, actually, for another real property issue until next Tuesday. I know it's hard to get in touch with me, but I promise you, be patient. I'll get you on the list, and I'll get these newsletters out to you. All right, final word, two final thoughts. I want you to thank Dan Fowler when you see him today. He will not tell you this, but the amount of his personal money, not his business money, his personal money that he has contributed to this fight, not just this one, but all the fights that have come before, he's too humble to tell you what that amount is. I can tell you it's significant. He goes out of his way more than anybody I know to educate you guys, to help you guys, to give you a value-driven product, which is your membership here. So if you see him walking around today, please thank him. Dan Fowler is the guy with the white hair that introduced me today. The second point I want to make to you guys is, and this is probably more important, I want to thank you guys for coming out today. Thank you for being here. Thank you for participating in the industry. Thank you for sitting here, trying to educate yourselves and trying to improve your situation. It's incredibly important that you guys are at these things. I'm starting to see more and more landlords get involved, and this is how we win. So thank you very much. Have a great rest of your day. If you have any questions, my booth, like I said, is literally right outside that curtain right there.